And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. U.S. and NATO forces are preparing to launch a second major military offensive in Afghanistan this June, this time in the city of Kandahar. Pentagon spokesman Jeff Morrell told reporters attempts to remove the Taliban from Kandahar are already underway and that the military operation would last 2 months. Meanwhile, a report from the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights claims over 2/3 of Afghans live in dire poverty. The report criticizes the international community for emphasizing security over development and also cites widespread corruption within Afghanistan, noting that the country has received $35 billion in aid since 2002. Well, for a perspective on the war in Afghanistan that's rarely heard in this country, I spoke to Wada Khanfar, the Director General of Al Jazeera, the international TV network headquartered in Qatar. We had a wide-ranging conversation last week about U.S. policy in the Middle East and the role of independent voices in the media, but I began by asking him what he thinks of President Obama's expansion of the war in Afghanistan.
It is very sad. It's very complicated. We don't see how this kind of war will reach its destination. What kind of goal increasing, military in Afghanistan will lead to. The time has come that the Americans, the administration actually, departs completely from the old way of thinking. They should have different approach. They should adopt dialogue with people, with entities, with the groups, with movements in Afghanistan and in the rest of the Arab world. They should sit and talk to them. We in the Arab world are we are in a very sensitive period between two landmarks. The old that doesn't want to die, and the new that doesn't want to be born. So Obama administration should embrace this transformation. They shouldn't take side with one against the other. It is not for the American interest that the administration takes side with this government against the people or with this party against this party. I think we look at America as superpower, and we expect America to behave like a superpower, not supporting one single party.
You were there when the U.S. invaded? When
the U.S. started the invasion, I was not there. But by the end, in December 2001, I arrived in Kabul, and I took over the operation there up to June 2004.
And how do you think it compares, Afghanistan, December 2001 to today?
I can't say I haven't come back to Afghanistan at that time, but definitely the situation did not change much. Afghanistan is still going through a crisis. Taliban is still there. Taliban influence is growing, and they are, I think, they are there. And I think Taliban itself is changing, learning, developing. And this is why I say direct dialogue between the Americans and Taliban is necessary, because eventually they are there and they represent certain kind of tribes, a certain kind of cultures. We cannot eliminate them unless if there is some kind of approach which is different from bombing people. Bombing and killing will always increase the anger and frustration against the Americans, and it will always be in favor of Taliban or in favor of any other movement in the Middle East. I think the best approach at this moment in time is to open up proper dialogue with those who have been fighting each other for a long time.
Do you have a bureau in Afghanistan?
We do. We have, for always actually, we have a bureau in Afghanistan.
Are you concerned about it being bombed again? It was bombed once, is that right?
It was bombed during the war. By the end of the American war on Afghanistan, it was bombed by American jets.
And what guarantees do you have that that won't happen again?
I hope not, because I think the atmosphere at this moment in time, people understand Al Jazeera much better. And I don't think that the American forces in Afghanistan or in Iraq or wherever they are now can do something like that, because it seems to me that there is developing proper understanding of Al Jazeera role and what Al Jazeera is all about.
You've come to the United States now a few times since President Obama came into office. Why didn't you come before?
It was difficult. During the previous administration, Al Jazeera was accused of many accusations by Mr. Rumsfeld, Mr. Wolfowitz, and others who saw in Al Jazeera a threat to the American presence in the region, especially after our coverage of Afghanistan and our coverage of Iraq. We have heard a lot of accusations and misconceptions that were spread about Al Jazeera. It was, we had, I mean, here in the States, I mean, it was difficult for me to come and speak because it seems to me that Al Jazeera was a scapegoat for a lot of failures that happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is why I think we
were not... What do you mean
failures? Everyone knows at this moment in time that the approach that the previous administration had to the war in Iraq and Afghanistan was full of mistakes and full of problems. And Al Jazeera was introducing another opinion from the region, from within the region, telling the world certain issues related to the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, which I think Western media didn't want to hear, or a lot of them at least, and also politicians didn't want to hear it. Now I can tell you, after all these years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan, Al Jazeera was right, and a lot of people were wrong about the war, about the coverage of the war, and about issues that led to the coverage of war. You know, we were there, we were listening to the public, to the people, reporting from within Afghanistan and Iraq. We were telling a story from within the region, and others wanted certain kind of ideas to be spread, and they wanted to silence those who are giving an alternative view about the region.
I remember interviewing you in Doha at Al Jazeera, and it was the time when the Daily Mirror had just released this Downing Street memo that allegedly revealed President Bush told British Prime Minister Tony Blair, it was April 2004, of his desire to bomb Al Jazeera. Do you know if this was true?
I know it is true. Yes, it is. It was true. I think this discussion took place, and we have been assured by many, parties.